Good evening, mi gente. Good evening, family. This is Ray Collazo, and you're listening and watching to the Found in Translation talk show, the talk show that stacks truth about politics and today's hottest issues. Again, this is your host, Ray Collazo. Thank you so much for joining us on it's actually a warmer Thursday night in the Northeast than normal. One of my sons was telling me this morning, is it normally this warm in March? I was like, well, when I was a kid, but a lot of funny things are happening with the climate, so you never know what's going on. Again, this is your host, Ray Collazo, the host of the Found Translation talk show. Again, the show that stacks truth about politics and the latest headlines impacting all Americans from a Latino perspective. This is your host, Ray Collazo. Thank you for watching and listening, whether it's live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or as audio files, as a podcast, anywhere, and I mean anywhere. You can download and subscribe to podcasts. We have a lot of Spotify listeners. Any of the music streaming platforms like Pandora, Spotify, we are very prominent, as well as on iTunes and Stitcher. Anywhere you can download a podcast. Thank you again so much for joining us. And, of course, we're also a radio show at WPPMOP 106.5 FM in Philadelphia, people-powered media. We're going to bring on a very special guest, Kristellys Estanga, in a moment to sort of pour one out for someone that we have a lot of admiration for. Of course, I'm referring to Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, who unfortunately stepped down today, left the race because the path sort of pretty much dried up. And we're going to talk about our emotions, what we feel this means for women in politics, for the Democratic Party, the ideological direction of our country, and what this means for the overall race for President of the United States now that we have three septuagenarians left in the field. Again, if you're watching live, feel free to post your comments either on Facebook, Twitter, and I've actually put on the feed the link. You can actually join the show. So if you're one of our Warrenites that just wants to vent or just wants to be part of this conversation about what Elizabeth Warren stepping off the presidential stage means and what, in general, what's going on with the headlines, you're free to welcome us. Let's bring on a very special guest. I appreciate her. She's very busy doing the good work of organizing our communities, especially the disenfranchised in the great state of Florida. Activist and Elizabeth Warren supporter, Kristellys Estanga. Kristellys, welcome to Found in Translation.
Thank you for having me tonight. I'm excited.
You know, Kristellys, it's interesting. I was thinking about the day we met about a year in fall of 2018. We were excited. We were at an event endorsing candidates. We were connecting with people of like mind, and I was so excited. And you pulled me aside and said, "I saw some polling. Don't get as excited about that as you think." So I'll just leave it at that. So you were a bit of a downer that day, but in general, you've been a great activist, and you've been really one of the passionate. You've been on the front lines of educating, particularly the Latino community and Floridians, around why people should support or should have supported Senator Elizabeth Warren. So I just wanted you to sort of be a vessel for not only sort of Elizabeth Warren fans out there, and there's a lot of them in my friendship circle, but also just wanted to just talk shop with you about sort of where this leaves the primary process. So why don't we just start, Kristellys, from the beginning?
Yeah.
What initially, as a progressive activist in Florida, as a Latina, what initially appealed to you about Senator Warren's presidential candidacy?
Yeah. So I think, it starts with that point that you made about me talking to you about the polls and, being sort of a downer to you that day. I like to be really steeped in truth and reality. I think we in politics, we try to gloss over that. And as a consequence, we miss the votes of brown and Black communities that we just don't take the turn to sort of learn how to reach out to as progressives and Democrats. And that's really where my heart was when I came on board as a staff for the Elizabeth Warren campaign. When I was volunteering for her and organizing for her across the state, is that ability and willingness really for that Elizabeth Warren had to really go into communities of color and listen to their issues and saying, you know what, like, I don't have it all together. Like, I don't have all the answers, but she's willing to bring people around her, especially Black women and Latinas, to really craft the issues on her platform. And when I see something like that in a leader, that's what gravitates me towards them. And when I see the choices, and something that somebody in MSNBC talked about today, all of a sudden they're praising, right? Which is what they do. They're praising the campaign after it's done. But when you see a candidate and you see the choices that they make as far as who becomes part of their team, you saw one of the most intersectional teams that I've seen in a whole while, and because of that, that to me gives me it makes me recognize that she's wanting to surround herself with people who are doing the work from the grassroots and really wanting to have a campaign that speaks to the people. So that's what really attracted me. And of course, like all of the amazing plans, and I'm a very systemic sort of like, give me your list and tell me exactly what you're going to do and how it's going to affect my people. And
well, I remember we had a meeting in Orlando in December, and that's that was how you ended your introduction. You said all these issues that Ray's going to talk about today in his team, Elizabeth got a plan for that. So now this brings us to the $100,000 question, $1 million question. I guess if it was Bloomberg, the $500 million question is right. That then ¿qué pasó? Because what you just said resonates with me, right? Because not only very prepared, experienced, sort of the right temperament and the balance of temperament and preparedness for the time, right? Because we're looking for a fighter. We're looking for someone prepared. We're looking for someone to sort of challenge, push the envelope on progressive values, the coalition, right? Yeah. I've been saying this, sort of tongue in cheek, but in all seriousness on the show for a year. I said, if I put all of my friends and activists, all of my friends and family in buckets, the people I admire the most collectively are the Warren heads because of, the kind of seriousness and passion and sort of care that they're taking in making these decisions, what they're going to support. And then that was reflected in the team that they put together. People like you, people that we know from all over the country that are part of the Warren team. So then it comes to really two questions. The big question was, why didn't she quite catch the wave that we thought, well, at some point, statistically, she was in. But then I think, Kristellys, the biggest one that's a mystery to me, and I have some thoughts on it, but I want to hear your perspective, is why she didn't, if we had all these strong women of color that were crafting her message, she was listening to our community throughout the campaign.
Yeah.
Why didn't our communities, it click? Because it didn't click. And it frustrates me. I wonder. I have some thoughts on it, but I want to get your thoughts, Kristellys, who's someone who was on the front lines of that whole situation.
Yes. So, and there's no one answer, or there's no. I don't know if I have it. I don't. But these are my thoughts from what I've seen. And I'll start with a quote that was going around a few months ago within the Warren team is, what happens when all these nerds get together and form a campaign. You have an Elizabeth Warren type campaign. It was very intellectual, and it was good to be intellectual, right? It's good to really think through the issues and the systemic problems that we have and really dig deep and problem solve around that with the right people. So that's good in of itself. I think where we got a little bit lost, and we saw this with the healthcare plan, right? When we started talking about the healthcare plan, and we didn't really have an answer, or perhaps the answer was too convoluted. That's when the polls started going down. And what I think that speaks to, and a good friend of mine actually sort of shed some light on this. So this is not an original thought of mine. But it makes sense, is that this campaign really spoke to a lot of people who had the time to be intellectual about these issues, which we have to be. She has a lot of support among people who have a higher degree, right? Like postgrads and people who are more of the higher educated folks. And I don't think the plans that were so gray and so dense were able to ever get down to people that were not geeks like we were, like we are. And we're not talking politics all the time. And so I think there was a need to simplify that message to get to specifically communities of color. And I'm not saying dumb it down or water it down, but people who are not in our space are constantly moving constant 2-3 jobs.
Kristellys, I'm sure, will be back in a moment. She was making an excellent point. Kristellys, can you hear us?
Yes.
All right, continue.
Yes. Are we good?
Yeah.
All right. Where did I leave off?
We're good. Basically, that it was communicating these intellectual plans was the challenge. So you didn't miss much.
Yeah. So that's where I think we did. I talk about the healthcare.
Yeah, you started,
okay.
And that's where we got frozen.
Right. Okay. So we see this when we started talking about the healthcare plans, and we either didn't have a good enough answer on how to pay for it, or it was too convoluted, it was too complicated, whatever it was. Not anything bad about the plan, but the fact that we couldn't explain it, that's when we saw the polls go down, right? That's exactly when we saw the polls go down.
And then to that point, the fact that you were put in a position, you explained it, well, someone could argue, right? If pessimistically, she took the bait to explain it. When Bernie Sanders has not been put in the same,
right.
His feet have not been put in the fire as much, and he's just been whatever. He's just been more obstinate in sort of responding to that bait, if you will.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure because he's been around for a lot longer, so I'm sure he knows how to go around that question in, I don't know, swifter ways. But there's all these externalities that are happening in the political landscape of her being a woman, of her being asked things that are not asked of any other candidates. But I think at the end of the day, being able to articulate that message in a way that is understood to people who are not political geeks like we are, who are, living day to day, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, trying to make ends meet, to our communities, and it's not dumbing it down, but it's really marketing your message to different target groups, right?
Absolutely. I take my cues a lot from my youngest brother. I have 2 brothers, and my youngest brother, my middle brother, similar education backgrounds, 4-year degrees and similar social circles. My other brother got some college, but, Teamster, and, has worked mostly blue collar jobs and is also a music artist. And he sort of is one of these people that has a great way of just sort of boiling things down to very logical street sense. And that's one of the things that I've learned from him when I feel I'm able to communicate things, and he's like, let's bring you down to earth here. And one of the things that's frustrating, and I know y'all have thought about this and we've lost some sleep over it, I'm sure, is that Senator Warren does have the story of being poor, the story of, one family tragedy, being away from essentially being homeless as a young person, being a single mom, being someone who's a struggling college student. And we heard about that, but it seems like in hindsight, that should have been the lead, that should have been more in front her story than the plans, because then when you get into the details, and particularly I think strategically, and I know healthcare is incredibly important, and God, this is what we've done to medicate. How much have we worked on this, right? But that, the fact that she was also sort of essentially trying to clean up or fashion a version of Bernie Sanders' lead message, I think also put her in a position that didn't put her at her strength, or she could be the focus of the debate. She was sort of playing off him a little bit. So what are your thoughts around what lessons does this teach us around telling those stories? Because on one level, we want to be substantive, and that's always kind of the struggle with women in politics, or women in the career field, especially women of color. Like, you got to be 3 times better. You got to have your stuff together. Yeah. And I think part of the frustration we see is that Vice President Biden, which obviously has a career, credentials, basically had 3 good days in a year, and now all of a sudden he's the heavy favorite at this point. So, what are your thoughts around what this teaches activists and progressives around just kind of getting to it in a way that connects emotionally, and just telling the story about this vision? Because it obviously works sometimes, and Elizabeth Warren, if you look at it statistically, cut into Bernie Sanders' base about a third or so. So she did move the ball forward, but obviously not enough with the time she had. So just what are your thoughts about what do we do, Kristellys? What do we do to better tell the story in a way that reaches the people that we really need to, that we're here to support ultimately, and improve their lives?
That's the question. Am I still on?
I'm here. I'm just putting you in the front, my friend. I'm just giving you the star of the platform. I don't go where everybody gets worried about that. Believe me, I'm here. Don't worry about it. Talk to my people, my friend.
Yes. So that's a question that I think we're going to grapple with for a while. My experience, and when I was knocking on doors for Elizabeth Warren, and I was knocking on Latinx communities, a lot. I was received really well just because people didn't even know that the primaries were happening. And so when it comes to a primary, I think there has to be a different approach than the general. I think once you win the nomination, you can really get down into things. But to make that first connection, especially with voters of color who have not been engaged with historically, they just want to know what's happening. They want to feel included. And when I talked to, I remember this one woman specifically, when I told her this is a woman who's running for president, and when I told her that, she immediately just had a positive reaction. She didn't know about Elizabeth Warren. She would definitely vote for her. And I didn't have to explain all that much, just the fact that she wanted, this, like 2 or 3 points about her platform, very, very general. But they're just glad to know that they're engaged. And so to your point of the story, I think the story should have definitely been the lead. And I think, and I will tell you internally, that was a very big focus and the way that we were trained too, like we were trained to always lead off with our own stories and then talk about Elizabeth's story because it connected with people. I think, I don't know where that got lost in translation, but on a national level, I think there should have been more ads about her story and not so much about the substantive stuff. But she's really introducing herself for the first time to a lot of people. We know her, but a lot of people don't. Bernie definitely has a lot more name ID, and so he didn't have to do that. But I don't think it's the last we'll see of her. Like I think there's still a shot for her to come back in 2024.
Absolutely. And you're listening and watching to Kristellys Estanga, Florida activist, now with Organized Florida. What is your title at Organized Florida now, Kristellys?
My lead county. So Osceola is like the fastest growing Hispanic county in Florida. So
all my Puerto Ricans know about Osceola. We all got cousins there. That's the La Capital de Puerto Rico, Kissimmee. No, we're very familiar with it, Kristellys, and we always appreciate your leadership. Want to shout out a couple people watching live on Facebook. One of my spiritual advisors, Pastor Adan Mairena. Kristellys is a wonderful man. Does a lot of work with our youth in Philadelphia. I believe a Honduran immigrant. He's got a great story. He's saying, Warren is an educator at heart. He's bringing it down. And my cousin, Vanessa Gigliotti, Boricua with a very Italian name. Vanessa is a cancer warrior. Kristellys has defeated colon cancer in her life and has dedicated her life to supporting, obviously, Medicare for all and healthcare for all. So good to see my prima here supporting. Kristellys, let's just talk for a second about what happened Tuesday. It's clear since, for the last 5-6 business days that somebody got the memo in the Democratic establishment. And, you could call it conspiracy. You could call it just good organizing, coalescing, unifying, hating. But basically, the black voters in South Carolina seem to signal not only to black voters throughout the South and to some degree throughout the country, but also to voters that were either already that either gave them more consumer confidence to go to Biden, coalesce behind Biden. And then once Buttigieg and the others stepped aside, there seemed to be a coalescing and kind of as much around a fear of what a progressive candidate like Bernie Sanders or Warren would mean for the party, whether it's viability or, I believe, from the establishment perspective, what if they won? But also, just sort of like a comfy level. Biden's like comfy shoes, whether it's people of color or just people that, Obama nostalgia for the Obama era, or a nostalgia for the way politics used to be, where Democrats or Republicans would go get a beer, after work in the chambers in Washington. So, Kristellys, I know a lot of progressives, even more so the Warren support crowd, are kind of feeling a lot of emotions around this, and just trying to figure out, do we belong in this party? Are we listened to? Obviously, the Latino community in particular, particularly younger Latinos who are very engaged in the Sanders campaign, feeling, sort of questioning what just happened here the last week. So, even though you're still a young person, you've been in the game for a minute. And, this is, so share with us how you're feeling and what, as progressives, we should be thinking about the next steps. Obviously, Bernie's still in the game. Warren's going to have something to say at some point about an endorsement, I would imagine. I got my thoughts on it, and I got some information on it we'll get into. But, talk to us about how we should be thinking about moving forward here as progressives and activists that, kind of want to push the party forward and this country forward in a progressive way.
Yeah. I mean, it's that's a lot, this whole moment right now, it's just humongous to think about. I think as progressives, and it's something that I've always tried to model and espouse myself, is leading with unity and leading with that spirit of, we all have very deep-rooted sentiments about certain things and our own candidates, but we have to know that everything that we do, whether we're on this team or that team or whatever, we're all in this together, and we have to organize in that way, organize collaboratively, organize humanely. And so, the vitriol on any of the sides is something that we should not do. And it's not good for the movement overall. I think too, it's something that I wrote on my Facebook today, is that every time I love campaigning because it just grows your family. And to me, I take my organizing family real serious here in Florida, and we just keep growing.
That is so funny. No, continue, Kristellys.
Yeah. So with every cycle, you meet different people and you expand that organizing family. And really, at the end of the day, we have to look at these things big picture. No big thing is going to get changed in just a cycle, 2 cycles, 3 cycles, 4 cycles. We have to be committed to this, and we have to be okay with the losses, because even in the losses, we are building, right? We're building people power. We're building even money power. With Bernie Sanders and to some extent Elizabeth Warren, and there's a progressive movement that can be funded effectively with enough people on board. So there is enough people power, and I think money power, to take on the establishment. And by this, I mean the corporate establishment that is existing on both sides of the political spectrum. Not the party and everything. I love my party people. I have friends who are party people. So I think we have to really step back and look at this as a bigger picture. Know that it's going to take a while, and after this, let's take a breather. Yes, but also let's work together to establish those relationships within our progressive circles that we may be damaged during the primary, and just keep going with a unified voice, because it's the only way we can do it. There's no other way that we can do the changes that we need to make happen without unity. There's just no way.
Kristellys, just curious about your, just kind of getting back to the horse trading piece.
Yeah.
What's your reaction when people say Senator Warren should have dropped out before Super Tuesday? Because at that point, particularly after South Carolina, I mean, I was saying, just by knowing the math and the dynamics, that after Iowa, it was not looking good for her in the polls in New Hampshire. And that, this would have given the progressive option a better chance. What do you say to people that are critical of the timing of Warren stepping off out of the race?
I get it. I was questioning that myself as well. I think I was glad that she didn't drop out. I think I was glad to see the results on Super Tuesday with her in it, because it was just a confirmation upon confirmation that this is where we're at. And I think she owed it to her support, her fans, and her voters and people that support her, to really see through not just a few random states, but a whole list of states, and see how she does. I think she dropped out at the right time.
And you could argue that it a few ways. I mean, on some level, I totally hear that, and I'm not mad at her. I think at the end of the day, statistically, it probably didn't make a big difference. Bernie probably would have gotten 5 more delegates or something if you look at the math, because Bloomberg sort of was cutting in hypothetically, Bloomberg was cutting into Biden's edge, margins is more, at least as much as Warren. But I think that, on some level, I think it would have helped as much to just slow down the momentum. So if she'd done it Sunday night or Monday morning, it would have eaten into that media cycle a little bit. But what I was saying on the show, and I know Kristellys, she watched the show and everything, is that, whenever that were to happen, when I kind of saw the writing on the wall that it was going to be Sanders, not Warren, sort of being the lead in that lane, is that it would have to, I just questioned whether during this time frame that partnership could have happened. That would have felt good for both parties, if that makes sense. And it just never felt like, whereas a Buttigieg, it was sort of easier for him to sort of fall in line with Biden. I mean, he's a young boy, and, Biden's big dog. Obama calls you to tell you to step off. What are you going to do, right? And he's got a future. Whereas Warren and Sanders, it's a different dynamic. So I always questioned, even if it happens in a week, if that coalition is really going to sort of build the way the more moderates have. And you're watching to Kristellys Estanga and Ray Collazo on Found in Translation. I'll tell you what, you don't need basic cable. You got, some of the great activists like Kristellys and others that have joined us throughout this election season. Want to give a shout out to some people watching the show. A great friend to the show, Elvita Quiñones Torres, realtor and educator in Philadelphia. Thank you for doing this. Collazo, your work touches many lives. Keep it up. I'm grateful for you. Well, I'm grateful for you, Elvita, and I'm grateful for all of you. Stellis will be back in a second. My cousin, Vanessa Gigliotti, breaks it down exactly. And Elvita, again, another compliment. I love both your guys' shirts. Well, this is retro, girl. This is Democracy USA from way back in the days. This is like Negro League baseball jerseys. You can't find too many of these anymore. And Kristellys has jumped off the line. So while she comes back on, I'll just remind people again, if y'all have any comments, break it down. Jump on the show. I put the link in the chat. If you go up to the scroll, you certainly can join the show yourselves on camera and keep the comments going. And Vita's talking about that we're on point. You're getting a lot of love here today, Kristellys Estanga. So what I want to ask, talk to us about Florida for a second, my friend. The primary's coming up. Your people, una Venezolana, you gotten some attention with Bernie's comments and that discussion around the word socialism, foreign policy, and how Latin American history is going to potentially play in the Florida primary. So for people that are not in Florida, curious about how this race moving forward is going to play out, give people a flavor of how the Latino community is feeling at this point in Florida, and what should we be looking for? What's important for Latino Florida voters as we move forward in this process from the work you're doing with Organized Florida?
Yeah, in regard to, the comments, I think I have to be careful with what I say because it's a heated topic in my community. And so I would caution any campaign to, speak carefully about any socialist government, whether you think it's good or bad. It's just a topic that cannot, I think it's so nuanced that it shouldn't be on the public like that, for a soundbite to get, taken over by the media. So, with that, what's important to us is really, especially in Florida, Florida is so troubled. And right now we have many crises, especially affordable housing is one. And it's something that Organized Florida is really working on. And we had the first statewide housing convening on the state capitol a couple months ago. And we've been moving some bills forward to implement rights for renters, tenants, and also pushing different counties and the state government at large to fund affordable housing. So what we're seeing in Central Florida, in Orlando specifically, is you have corporations, and this is a real live local example of pushing against corporate interests, which is, Elizabeth's and Bernie's both of the messages, and it's happening here in Orlando very tangibly, where you have Universal and Disney and the tourism industry, these corporate giants really ruling and buying up our elected officials, and in a way that does not benefit our residents at all. So we don't have public transportation because Disney says no, because they want people to stay in their parks and not go anywhere, basically. Right. We don't have affordable housing because of the development and the way that the corporations are buying up our elected officials to funnel our tax dollars into their projects.
Well, let me give Kristellys, let me give people that don't spend a lot of time in Central Florida one example. So when I was with you and Jared and our friends down there, we had a forum right before the holidays around these issues. Housing, you know what you're talking about when people start nodding their heads. And so when I'm telling people all over the country, because Kristellys, we hear it in Orlando, we hear it in Miami. Yeah. Hipsters are moving into Little Havana. We hear it in places like San Antonio, Phoenix. All of our historical Latino communities are getting gentrified. Yeah. And so this housing crisis, and of course, Central Florida, with not only this piece you're talking about, but the corporate, the Republican Party just does the corporate people whatever they want. Then the Puerto Rican migration, the Venezuelan migration into that part. It just gets exacerbated, right? So we're driving to the event, and in the middle, right? I mean, a kilometer from parks and incredible complexes, there's this huge empty field with 3 cows. And I'm like, and I don't know if it was you or Jared, one of our friends, it was in a car and said, if your property is a farm, or does livestock, you get a tax write-off. So these rich corporations put a couple cows and some grass on the acreage, and they get to write it off of their taxes. And this is property that we could use for affordable housing. That's reasonably located to a lot of the business there. And these are the kind of issues that we're dealing with. And so you're absolutely right. And to remind people about this long view conversation, the platform that Vice President Biden today is advocating for is way left of anything then Senator Obama advocated for in 2008. And that is because a lot of it's Bernie, a good chunk of it's Warren, but most importantly, it's the organizing that's taken place over the last decade, particularly in minority communities. And so just thinking about, the organized Floridas around the country, this collective, Arizona is in play because of the organizing that came out in Arizona, that came out of the immigrant rights anti-Arpaio movement, that now is transitioned into civic engagement organizing, which is now transitioned into electoral power and electoral movement. Now we have places like Texas and Arizona where state legislatures could flip potentially the cycle. A lot of that with young Latina leaders that are running for office. So that's, thinking about what I've seen, and you and I have seen over the last 10 years in Florida and throughout the country, we are making progress, but I'm telling you, youngins, just hang in there because it is a long-term game. There's no question about it. Your thoughts, Kristellys?
Yeah, the state legislature piece is so important. People who know politics know that a lot more you have to pay attention to local and state politics a lot more than presidential politics, in my opinion. Like, there are so many things that happen at a statewide level that affect us a lot more than what's happening nationally. And I think a good president, a good Democratic president will know to invest time, and a National Democratic Party should, and they are. But I think the president has a pulpit where they can talk to the whole country about the importance of state legislature, the importance of civic engagement at a local level, at a state level, that our engagement does not stop at every 4 years and the month of November, because all those policies that are being created in Tallahassee are so dangerous for our communities, and they're already affecting our communities very negatively. Our council people, our county commissions is just so it is so imperative that we pay attention to those, even more so than presidential cycles.
The only Latino that I know that's a bigger fan of Warren, Kristellys, a very good friend of mine. I haven't seen him in so long. I miss him. Mauricio Mena from LA. He's a Hollywood writer. He writes screenplays and TV shows and stuff. Mauricio Mena says, preach, girl. He's very big. He's fanboying, my friend. He's fanboying. So Elvita Quiñones breaks it down about the housing piece, which again, and, we have to figure out a better way to get it out of the polling because we don't extract that from polling from Latinos, but this housing piece is unbelievable. Oh, my God. I need a video clip of how you mentioned all of our Latino communities are getting gentrified. We need to teach Latinos and supporters about this. Our safe spaces, Latino neighborhoods are being compromised. We need to educate the people so they know and connect accordingly. That's from Elvita Quiñones Torres, educator and activist and businesswoman from Philadelphia. My cousin Vanessa from the Bronx, the Boogie Down, breaks it down. Agreed. You also enact policies easier locally versus nationally. So thinking about strategic organizing and the idea that you want to get wins, right? Things that are ambitious but achievable to build your organizing platform. Kristellys, if you had the opportunity to have a conversation with Vice President Biden right now, and I'm thinking about it from two perspectives. One is
not one of the questions you sent me.
That's not, but that's hey, it's hey, why it's found in translation. Is that I think we're kind of concerned on two levels. Obviously, from a progressive perspective, we're concerned for obvious reasons, and then from a Latino perspective, and I'll share this part of it, and I'll go first. It'll make it easier. If Vice President Biden, I'm concerned about how your campaign will work with Latinos moving forward. Because what has happened is that, the strategy, which look, on some level, it's working for him, right? Was to basically rely and count on the Black community, particularly Black Southern voters that tend to be more moderate, all the factors we've talked about extensively on the show, is that, sort of, for whatever reason, not wanting to jump off the diving board for a more progressive option and settle on Biden. On the other side of it, we see partially because of strategy, partially because of policy, partially because of activity and engagement. Senator Sanders having, if not overwhelming support, very strong support in the Latino community, but particularly with younger Latinos in the Southwest. And I want to give a shout out to our homeboy, Julio Varela from Latino Rebels, that commented that if you look at the map from Super Tuesday, Senator Sanders won if not almost every border county in Texas and California, overwhelmingly. So we're talking about the Latinos that are on the front lines of these issues, right? Yep. So our concern, and I know, Kristellys, you're like me. You're talking to friends in Florida, friends all over the country. We're DMing each other. We're texting each other. We're reaching out to each other because we are concerned that Vice President Biden's going to be like, what do I need Latinos for? Like, if you look at the chessboard now, there's only really two major Latino communities still left. Well, three: New Mexico, Arizona, Florida. For obvious reasons, he has a big advantage in Florida at this point. Let's keep it real. And our concern is that does he put a Black person on the ticket and promise the Black community a Supreme Court justice, and we sort of move on with a milquetoast agenda? Because what our Latino community, especially our young people, are responding to is not just the old funky, the old man. Look, the guy they're supporting is older. The issue is, you were the vice president for Obama. That's nice. But guess what? Your boss was the deporter in chief. Your boss didn't do anything to move the ball on income inequality for young people. Your boss put the Promesa bill board in place for Puerto Rico to even choke the debt and the leadership of the island even further. So with all due respect, and not to say, we're here to pile on Obama, but the reality is those are the facts. So what are we going to get in a real way, for real, from a potential Biden presidency? Forget him as a candidate. So that's my message to him. So if I had that conversation with him, so jump in. You want to jump in on Sanders or elaborate on that? Because that to me is the conversation we need to have now, because I'm not quitting on Bernie.
Well, this is
both of them have to be held accountable in the same way.
Yes, this is a conversation that I would have with Biden if I could. Is what I've gone through. I went through an exercise for work for an event that we had a few weeks ago, of going through every Democratic candidate's platform on the major issues that our organization is about. One of them is affordable housing. I went through all of the platforms and I saw what they were about. The only person who did not have a comprehensive affordable housing plan Biden. And it was really, really telling to me. And I did not expect that. I just didn't expect that. And that's not to give him any crap or anything, but that's just a reality. It hasn't been found. So going forward, Biden needs to have an affordable housing plan, because this really speaks to the Puerto Ricans, the Venezuelans that are coming here, all the Latino families, the Black communities, everybody who is being affected by gentrification, which is, of course, communities of color. So, and especially in Florida, where the housing is just going up and up and up. And again, all across, like you have to say something on affordable housing. Like there's no, reason why you shouldn't. And another is, we really have to. I think presidential candidates, some have been taking the Hispanic vote for granted. Of course, they have.
Of course.
And I think we're getting to a point where we're actually really thinking about who we're voting for, because especially with people my age, like we came here for a better life. Like our parents brought here for a better life, and we're not seeing it. And we have to now fight for things that other countries don't have to fight for. And if I were somebody in Latin America or elsewhere, and I was like, what country should I go to guarantee my kids a better life? It would not be America right now. It would be somewhere else. And there are reasons for that. So we have to speak to those concerns. And those are, immigration policies, housing, healthcare, the wage issue. Like that is just bread and butter issues for our communities. And another thing is the Puerto Rican. I mean, that's if you're going to look at Florida, you cannot discount the Puerto Rican vote. And speaking to that, I'm afraid that it happened in the last gubernatorial race in 2018. More Hispanics voted for the Republicans. Why? Because they were on the radios, they were on newspapers, they were on all these media that Hispanics listen to and watch. And
Senator Nelson was so bad engaging Latinos.
Yeah,
and look, Scott's policies suck when it comes to Latinos, unless you're elite. Or unless you're one of the elite. I mean, with all due respect, Cuban Americans, I guess, get access to business and stuff. I mean, except those elite Republican leaders,
Mm-hmm.
But when polls happen, he was there. When Puerto Rico stuff happens, he goes to Puerto Rico, like the basic things.
Yeah.
But if you compare that to zero, which is what Nelson did essentially, that's what we get. Yeah.
And we have enough people power in Florida of Hispanics to really put pressure on presidential candidates. We're not using it right. We're letting things like Biden being profiting from vulture funds managers from that are destroying Puerto Rico. We're letting that happen, and we're just saying that that's okay, and we're going to vote for Biden because he has the best chance. I don't think that's right. And I think, and again, it's not to give him any crap, but I think it's to hold our leaders accountable. And listen to our needs.
That's right. And I think in terms of like what we would talk to Senator Sanders about, there's a whole lot we'd like to chat with Senator Sanders about. But obviously, I think it to some degree, it goes back to the Warren conversation, right? Because Sanders is so, his weakness is his strength, right? Because he's consistent, right? And that breeds, particularly for young people, a sense of honesty and a sense of trust with him because of his authenticity. Mm-hmm. But he's going to have to he just has to kind of just drop the ideological conversation right now and just focus on honesty. I mean, look, what we just said, there's no reason Sanders can't say that. And there's all kind of things you could say similarly as it relates to the Black community. Mm-hmm. When he gets on that stage a week from Sunday, he needs to be straight up with the Black community around. Look, you can prefer him for whatever reason, but these are the facts. And we're talking about the crime bill. We're talking about, the centrist, get along kind of impulse that Biden has had. When look, I mean, to some degree justifiable. Dealing with very moderate conservative governments here for decades, right?
Yeah.
And he needs to he needs to be real with people around those issues and really call the question, why are you supporting this guy, particularly in the minority community? Why? Because all the surrogates are telling you to?
Yeah.
Because of Obama? Obama loved him so much, he still hasn't endorsed him publicly.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just be honest about it. And I say it on the show, but let's keep it real. Obama put a lot of chips on the roulette wheel, my friends. He put a chip for Beto. He put a chip for Kamala. He put a couple chips for Buttigieg, because I've talked about it extensively on the show. His whole team were Obama people. So, if Obama didn't feel super confident about him and now has helped coalesce a última hora, there's no reason why we shouldn't. And Sanders needs to be that honest and raw at that debate, because that might be his last shot. Any thoughts for Sanders, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, strategically speaking, it's a two-person race now, right? It's going to be Biden or Bernie. And Bernie ran last time. It'll probably his last time running for president, I would think. I don't know. But strategically speaking, he's gotten to a point where he can really deliver some blows, as it were. And he really should. He really should, if he, in a way that keeps Biden accountable, in a way that speaks truth to the issues, not in a way that's divisive and all these things. I don't think he's been that way, although people say he has. But really nitpick a bit more. Let's really study these issues. And I think that's on stage. Backstage, I will give so much credit to Chuck Rocha and his people. I think he's really done a great job at doing the Latino engagement and outreach. I mean, it shows, right? To a point where anytime Bernie Sanders now is asked about what happened to the Black vote, he kind of pivots to, hey, but we got the brown vote. Well, yeah, cool, thank you, love it. But it's not good enough.
And by the way, not in the same margin. Let's be honest about it. Not in the same margins that Biden's getting African American support. I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
Biden was, especially in Texas and even to some degree in California, was competitive with Latinos. He got about a quarter of the vote, and Bernie's getting between 35 and 45. So it's not a blowout. It very much is kind of the demographics of the Latino community. You kind of have like the more established, more moderate Democratic Latinos, our parents' generation of Democrats, and maybe me as I get older, people that were more traditional Democrats. And now we have this young woke generation that, they're progressive before they're Democratic. Mm-hmm. And they care about intersectional issues.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, they're the most passionate. Look, Latino immigrant young people and people mix that, they're the ones that have the most to lose, period.
Exactly.
In November, even more so than someone like me. So we have a good question for you, and I think this will help us wrap it up. Kristellys Estanga, we're watching, listening. This has been a great conversation. A great friend of ours, Elvita Quiñones. What do we need to do? So I want to take that question. I appreciate the love, Elvita. I want to take that question, Kristellys, to the perspective of an Elvita, which is an activist, is a Pennsylvania voter. So first of all, Elvita, you got something to say in 6 weeks. That wants to. So let's say someone that lives in a state that still hasn't voted yet. What do we do now? Or someone that's already had a vote. So how do we hold both campaigns accountable? How do we elevate the voice of these issues that I know I'm getting a lot of head nods watching on Facebook, and they're going to listen to this moving forward, because the reality is we need the best of Sanders and Biden, win or lose, so that we get the best candidate and the best message and the best turnout in November.
Yeah, I think one is to hold them accountable. And how do you do that? I think when we say that, we're like, okay, well, where do I go? Who do I speak to, right? These campaigns have offices in your cities, in your states. Go to these offices, talk to the staffers, talk to the volunteers, engage in conversation, and don't just take no for an answer or take some convoluted or I don't know, so just some general answer. Like really go to the events where the surrogates are speaking, where the candidates are speaking. Go to the forums, go to the town halls, go to any of the community events, and start talking to people, asking them, okay, I really want to vote for this candidate, but this is my problem. What do you say to me? Because this is really concerning me. And I think it's just that. I think if we vent all our frustration online, it's not going to go anywhere. But really be present and be visible and loud. It's the only way we've ever done things in this country, to be there to infiltrate spaces in a way that's a little bit disruptive, but for the greater good. So go find your campaign office, get in there, start talking to people, go to the events, ask questions, and hold people accountable.
Unless you're looking for Biden, he didn't even have campaign offices. He just wins elections. It's unbelievable to me. But Mauricio Mena breaks it down, my LA homie. I wonder, Mauricio, if you voted early or voted by mail. He's an LA guy now, but a proud Bronx guy originally, and they need to drag all their friends to the voting booth. Yeah. That's our power up. Preach, Mauricio. I need Mauricio on the show. He's always has a lot of great comments.
Yeah, I'm planning to get it. I haven't voted yet because I was waiting for things to just winnow down. But I want to get a group of my friends and a group of our members in Organized Florida to just go and vote together and, post those photos on social media, have that social pressure be there.
Yeah. And I want to shout out Vanessa Maria Graber and her group at Philly Boricuas in Philadelphia. It's a group of Puerto Ricans here locally, Kristellys, that are having community charlas, community conversations around sort of connecting what's happening in Puerto Rico to these larger political dynamics and sort of why we advocate for progressive values in our community, sort of connecting the dots for people. So I think people, like you said, they just have to take a step. Look, I know, we have to get out there and talk to people, but that's part of this is why I do this. Because I'm like, how can I connect with people around the country in a way we can just get the information out? And so, we had, and to this point, I wish we had 20 more of these shows, honestly, because we had Congressman Ray Collazo on the show Tuesday. Part of the reason was there aren't too many shows like this, where people of color can just have these conversations and just get the information out. Look, and we're going to have a show because I know I have a few conservative Latino friends who are like, hey, our perspective, it's not about hating on one perspective. It's about getting the facts out. And just, how most Latinos don't know. It's so interesting that this Medicaid expansion piece in Florida and this housing stuff is resonating on the chat because most people don't know of that issue, don't know those dynamics and how we could actually make a difference on those things and how this stuff is getting engineered to really squeeze us in places like Florida and Texas. Kristellys and Estanga, why weren't you on the show before? We're just so busy. You became Warren. You were in Boston. You were living, you live in large. You're doing some great work. We're Organized Florida. Before I let you go, let people know where we have your Twitter handle there. So you can follow Kristellys at Kristellys on social media. But anything else you'd like to share with our Found in Translation community?
To your point, we need to, infiltrate physical spaces and also infiltrate the airwaves because that's a huge communication tool or medium for our communities. And so more shows like this, more podcasts, more radio shows, more radio ads. Yes. We need all of that. And get in touch with me at Kristellys. You can find one and just add me, connect with me. I use my social media as a way to engage and encourage people to get engaged in the process. We're all facing these issues locally and statewide in the same sort of way. Let's connect together and we have to really build that people power. And that's what it's about.
Absolutely. Kristellys Estanga, thank you so much for joining the show. And I want to give a special shout out, not only for your leadership, but a special shout out to all my Venezolanos out there. I really, when you go to Orlando, people say, the Puerto Ricans, but I'm like, 2/3 of the people I run into are Venezuelans. Such a robust part of our country, particularly in Florida, but throughout the country. Shout out to our homie, Fernando, who's the head of our local Casa Venezuela chapter here in Philadelphia, a very organized community. Obviously, as a Puerto Rican, a lot of cultural ties between baseball, salsa, and we're very much brothers and sisters from the Caribbean. And, we want to do whatever we can to continue to advocate for TPS so that our Venezuelan refugees can be properly settled into our country, address the ongoing issues happening in the country, the ongoing migrations, not only happening in the United States, but all over the Latin America. There's Venezolanos being displaced. I just saw Kristellys online, a podcast of Venezuelans in Australia who are just trying to get the word out and provide support for Venezuelans that are going to the Pacific Rim looking for safe havens. So, there's a lot going on with our brothers and sisters there. And I definitely want to connect you at some point to figure out how do we have those conversations about what's happening in Venezuela in a way because it's hard, because you're really translating political speak in languages, cultures between countries. And I think a lot of younger progressives in the United States, well-intentioned, just don't understand some of those dynamics. And I think there's a way we can kind of bridge.
For sure. There's a lot of people that I know that could speak very well to that. Here,
So we're gonna so I'm gonna lean on you to sort of make sure we figure out a way to do that that's respectful and informative for people in our community. Kristellys Estanga, thank you so much for joining Found Translation. It will definitely not be the last time in 2020, my friend. Let me tell you.
Yay! I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cristela. And that was Cristela Estanga on Found Translation. Cristela's fantastic. And I did have a couple before we let you all go. And I really appreciate, my friend Scarlett Bineta jumping on, a great supporter, patron of the show. I really appreciate Vita, Mauricio, Vanessa, Adan for checking out the show. I had a couple quick announcements before I let you all go. The first thing is I got a little gossip for y'all. I got two bits of gossip. So I got to break it down. See, the thing is what I like to tell y'all. What I tell y'all, I got information. And it would be greedy of me if I didn't share the information. So the information I got is, and I didn't want to put Kristellys on the spot, is that la razón that Elizabeth Warren didn't endorse Bernie and didn't endorse him yet before the election, after Super Tuesday, is that she's been basically negotiating, trying to get Biden to commit to certain things for her endorsement. Now, part of that is, seeing the writing on the wall. Obviously, at this point, Biden's a big favorite to win this nomination. Part of it, I think, you could argue could be the, la química entre Bernie and Elizabeth. And part of it is politics. Hey, if you can leverage this endorsement that potentially could put him over the top, why wouldn't you? So that's something to keep an eye on. There's reasons. She hasn't endorsed him yet. And a name that I heard, I couldn't believe it when I heard it. But again, I give y'all information. Don't be shocked. I would be shocked, but don't be shocked if Julian Castro ends up being Biden's VP nominee. Partially because of the negotiation with Warren, partially with the math and the thinking that Biden could have a Latino problem. And maybe, other things are committed to the Black community. And this could be a way of sort of bringing the coalition together. Vamos a ver. To the point on Elizabeth Warren potentially being the VP, I think I have two things on that. I think it would be tough. It would be tough for her to be the VP because I think it's really hard for Biden not to put a person of color on the ticket. I think that's one part of it. I think the other part of it on some level is that, I don't know. I know this sounds weird to say, but I almost feel like Warren's too qualified to be a vice president. And to me, what I think she really would want to do, and actually where she would be the most effective, and it's actually a much more powerful position, is be the Secretary Treasurer, which is Mnuchin, because that's basically the people that regulate Wall Street. Now, guess what? She ain't going to get that job. You know why she ain't going to get that job? Because Wall Street and those Democratic donors on Wall Street that are liberal, they believe in civil rights, but they don't want nobody messing with their money for real. So I don't see it. That's why she didn't get the CBP job back in the days, if y'all remember. So those are the dynamics that I'm hearing. Again, I hear things, and I'm here to give y'all what you want. So I'm giving you information. The other thing, just Collazo bochinche stuff. Blame it on coronavirus. So I get a call again. Y'all are part of this journey with me. This is as much a personal journey and a spiritual journey as anything else. And, as I say, I do my Kevin Hart. I'm going to get there and y'all going to come with me. All of y'all, for real. That's how I feel about it. This is much about our community and our people moving forward as me and my thing. I get a call. So I didn't share this on the show, but for the hardcore Found Translation fans, y'all know a few weeks ago I was on MSNBC. Much respect to the Queen, Alicia Menendez, for giving me that opportunity. Me hermana cubana. And so, I think I did a good job. Y'all said I did a good job, right? So what I didn't share on the show, because I didn't want to look like a show off and I didn't want to get too excited about it. I didn't want to, say something and it don't happen. So, but I'm going to keep it real with y'all. 151, like Bacardi, is that as soon as I got off the set, the producer for the weekend shows, not just Alicia's show, pulls me aside and said, Rafi, Ray, you were awesome. You're coming back. Then she pulls me aside with another producer and says, Mira, we want there's a new show. We're trying to give her like a regular rotation of people. Would you be down with coming back once a month? I was like, yeah. And I'm trying not to act like freaking out about it. I'm just being honest with y'all. This is what happened. Straight up. I'm getting red thinking about it because it's so exciting, but it's true. But I don't get on here talking about that because I don't know if that's going to ever happen. And you never know, right? So I get a call yesterday from the producer again. Do you want to come on Sunday? I said, "Está bien." Yeah, I think I can swing it. I can go back. No problem. 30 Rock. It's on my route. But I said, something told me, don't say nothing. Don't say nothing till Friday, just because you never know. And, you don't want to say something too quick. Something told me, don't say anything. And as I said on my social media earlier, we got to listen to the spirits in our heads. Our ancestors speak to us. We got to listen to our heart, open us up to it. And sure enough, I get a call from the producer a few hours ago. Ray, got to cancel. They've canceled all of their regular shows on Sunday because they're going to do a wall-to-wall thing about the coronavirus. They didn't even cancel me. They just canceled the whole show. They canceled Alicia. It's her show. So I just want to let you I'm straight up with y'all. Yeah, Grace, when I was on MSNBC, I went, but I went for a hot minute. I get drivers and stuff. I'm saying talents, that happens. But obviously, Grace, when I'm back on the show, I'll give y'all heads up. So I just share that to say I won't be on MSNBC this weekend because the coronavirus. Blame it on the coronavirus. But I share that to say that that they did call back. So, obviously they like me a little bit. So I just want to thank you all for your blessings, your good energy. For friends of mine, if you've known me for more than 6 months, it is my dream to do this. And, inch by inch. The other announcement related to the media stuff, particularly my Philly people, is that if you are in the Philadelphia market, you want to check out Flashpoint, which is a radio show, like a public affairs radio show on KYW Radio, our big news radio, the Bloomberg station of Philly, basically, KYW Radio. And that show is also simulcast on all their FM music stations. So B101, I think I'm on WIP this weekend, like at 6 a.m. And we taped the show about a week ago. So if you check out Sherry Gregg, who's a fantastic, deep political journalist in Philadelphia, a fantastic African-American broadcaster and journalist. Sherry Gregg had me on her show with Mike Toledo, my homeboy from Reading, and some local Hispanic journalists to break down the Latino vote in Pennsylvania nationally. So I did my thing on radio. That also will be podcasted. So Sunday I'll post the podcast if people weren't in the Philly market or don't know what's on. So check your local listings, fam, if you're especially if you're in Philly, because you can hear it all weekend in Philadelphia on multiple channels. And I'll be posting it as I get the schedule over the weekend. And then the last thing is, I didn't want Kristellys to be part of some sort of a downer, so I let her go. But this episode is dedicated to 3 people, two of which I knew personally, one of which I'm very close to a grandchild. We lost, we're losing a lot of people, unfortunately. And there's 3 people that have been a big part of my life on some level and different levels that are a big part of the lives of my community. I wanted to shout out because we lost them this week. This show was dedicated, first of all, to Jose Rodriguez. Jose Rodriguez, there's a lot of Jose Rodriguez's, so don't freak out, my Philly people, because I know you know many. Jose Rodriguez is the older brother of one of my compadres, Danilo Rodriguez. Jose Rodriguez, after growing up in New York City, basically lived his adult life in Indianapolis, Indiana. So a lot of my New York people don't know him, East Coast people. He never came to Philly, nothing like that. He looks just like my homie Danny. We lost Jose very young. We lost him at 49 years old, tragically, through cancer. Cancer freaking sucks. And he fought it for about a year. He passed away early this week, days after his 49th birthday. So I just want to say on behalf, anyone that knows me real well knows Danilo, his sister Anna, Lo Padre, La Mama from LES. That's my, they ain't blood, but they practically blood, my Columbia community. You know how wonderful Danilo and Joanne are to us. And so I just wanted to shout out love and respect to Danilo and his late brother, Jose, Joanne, the whole family. We've been heartbroken about it, and they're burying him tomorrow in Indiana. The other person I wanted to shout out as a rest in peace was a legendary figure in Puerto Rican politics and activism. Don Rafael Cancel Miranda passed away earlier this week. He was in his late 80s. He lived a very full life. Don Rafael Cancel Miranda is a historical figure. He was, along with Lolita Lebron and other Puerto Rican activists, did an action 1954 in U.S. Congress and were in prison for about 25 years before President Carter did a pardon for the 4 active Puerto Rican nationalists in the late 70s. And so basically lived the rest of his life, the last 30 years of his life, as an activist in the struggle. And so Don Rafael Cancel Miranda's grandson, Roberto Cancel, was used to work for me in Central Florida and was as a fantastic guy. Now works in international. I think he lives in Argentina now. The guy's very engaged in international affairs and relations. So for the Cancel Miranda, people that mean a lot to me personally, and Don Rafael Cancel Miranda, which means a lot to many of us in the Puerto Rican community and really around the liberation movement in Latin America, the Descansa en Paz. And the last person, the most shocking, and I know a lot of my friends, particularly Obama alums and our friends in South Florida, Patrick Hidalgo passed away. Patrick Hidalgo was a Cuban-American progressive activist, worked for the White House, did a myriad of organizing actions, and was known for so many things in South Florida. A very religious young man. He was a devout Catholic, went to Bible study. The morning he died, apparently he had some rare heart problem, and he died suddenly, I believe Sunday afternoon, 41 years old, a terrible tragedy. And so I worked briefly with Patrick, about 12 years ago with Democracia USA. That's why I'm wearing the shirt. George Morsuli is part of his sort of progressive Cuban-American network of friends and activists in South Florida, my former boss, who I know must be devastated over this loss. And so Patrick Hidalgo was a good brother and was part of sort of behind the scenes working with Ben Rhodes, if you know that name, Obama's point man on Cuban policy, trying to normalize relations, provide more resources to our beloved Cuban community, both in the United States and in Cuba. It was part of the deal to sort of open the doors for Cuban baseball players in the MLB. So a guy that did a lot for people. I mean, my friendship network is devastated by this. People that knew him better, particularly our Obama alums, friends. And so just the concept boss, Patrick, we lost him way too early. And so I just wanted to dedicate this episode to the people that we've lost, not only this week, but we've lost this year. Our friendship network have had some tough ones. And I just wanted to let you know that in the same way that the spirits speak to me, they speak to all of us. And so the people that we've lost are always with us, always in our hearts, always in our minds, always giving us consejos, always giving us support, energy, and love. And I just want us, and in these difficult times, we've lost some amazing people this week. I just want us to stay in that spirit. And the last thing I want to say is check up on your peoples. Check up on your peoples. Let them know you love them. Let them know you're thinking about them. And, we've got to be very grateful for the time that we have here together. Even listening to me, I'm grateful y'all listen to me talk for an hour. And let me tell you, it means a lot to me. You never know. Y'all will never know how much it means to me, the support and appreciation. Grace Bonilla is looking for me in New York. Scarlett Bonetta is giving me a shout out. Thank you so much, Grace. When next time this gets booked, I'll give people a little heads up. We'll try to figure out to connect very soon in New York. Thank you all so much for joining the Found Translation Talk Show. It'd be very helpful if y'all want to continue to support the movement, as you always do. I don't complain. Y'all are very supportive. If y'all could download and subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, I don't care what, if you have an Android phone or Android devices, anywhere you download podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora. A lot of our people listen to me on Spotify in between Nicky Jam and Osuna. They catch Found Translation. So please subscribe. If you have an app where you can review the show, put some stars on it, that's really helpful, particularly on iTunes. So if you have iTunes, if you could give me 2 minutes of your lives this weekend, para dar la gracia for the information you got today, you can just write a review on iTunes on your phone. It takes a minute. 5 stars and a quick review. It's really, really helpful. And if you do it, I'll give you a shout out on the show. A little incentive for you. Thank you so much for joining the Found Translation Talk Show. Ray Collazo. Continue to support the movement. Listen to me on Philly Radio this weekend, and continue to support the radio version of the program on Tuesdays at 11 o'clock at WPPMOP 106.5 FM in Philadelphia, P with Power Media. Enjoy the weekend, people. It's getting warm outside. Peace.